my friend's place tomorrow, and I was thinking of making spaghetti meatballs. But then one of my friends is actually allergic to dairy products. He cannot have anything milk related. So how does that work? Because spaghetti meatballs tend to have cheese in it. And especially in the meatballs, you mix it in. So I was thinking, let's find a cheese substitute. In Hong Kong, it's not that easy. So I had to think about something that is creamy, salty, and kind of has that nice fermented nutty flavor that cheese provides. So naturally, I came up with a suggestion. Fermented tofu. So fermented tofu is tofu that has been brined and it absorbs all the salty goodness, and it develops a little bit of that fermented funky flavor, and it also has that little nutty flavor. And my parents always described to me as Chinese cheese, which is kind of false because it's actually all tofu. There's no dairy in it. So one of the things about fermented tofu is that with the creamy flavor, it does actually taste a little bit like cheese, like a very salty, soft cheese. Almost as if it's like feta cheese, except it's much, much softer. So we're gonna try and replace the cheese in the meatball with fermented tofu, and we're gonna do a little experiment. So honestly, I don't know how this is gonna go, but we're gonna give it a try and see what happens. All right, so this is what fermented tofu looks like. I've taken a piece out from the jar, and you can see that it just looks like a little piece of tofu. It's a little bit firmer, but it does break down quite easily. Often in traditional Chinese cooking, it can be turned into a sauce. It's often kind of dissolved or cooked with vegetables. It's quite a spicy dish because they do ferment it with some chilies. As you can probably see in the jar, there's lots of chilies inside. So it's got some really strong flavors. They're a very good substitute for cheese. It's really hard to describe this smell. It definitely has that slightly fermented, funky smell. It smells nothing like tofu. There's really no way to describe it. I honestly don't know how to tell you what it smells like, but it does smell quite strong. I guess the only way to say is it's a little bit cheesy with some spices on it. All right, let's have a taste. Very spicy. It's got a slight astringent kind of taste. Very salty, but also creamy at the same time. So this is locally made in Hong Kong. And so, yeah, we'll just give it a try. So typically meatballs is made with ground beef, salt and pepper, and a blend of different herbs that you enjoy. There's no specific rule to what kind of herbs you put in your meatball. What I usually like to put in it is oregano, thyme, and garlic, along with a bit of salt and pepper. And of course, we're going to crack an egg in it as a binder to help it hold together. After splitting in half, I'm going to mix one half with Pecorino Romano, which is a sheep cheese. It's quite salty and creamy and has a nutty flavor. And put the fermented tofu in. So if you haven't noticed, we've been nibbling on it, so it's been getting smaller and smaller. So if you're wondering why I'm putting more in what I said earlier, it's because we've been slowly munching on it. So here we go. All that briny, tofu-y goodness. I hope this turns out, because this is actually a lot of meat. And somebody's got to eat it if it doesn't work out. All right, I think that's good. Let's mix up the meat with the pecorino romano. Okay, looks like they're both done. So this is the one with cheese. And it's really quite easy. Just get a nice tablespoon full of meat, roll it around, try and press it together a little bit. Right, not too hard, just enough for it to form a really nice shape. And there's a Chinese way of making it, and they believe in squeezing it between your thumb and your first finger, but I don't think it's going to be quite big enough. It's going to be a little bit smaller than that. So I'm going to stick with the old-fashioned hand-rolling way. So you get a nice size plump meatball. Alright, so these are the traditional cheese meatballs. Let's do the cheese substitute, the fermented tofu version of it. Alright, and our last one. Alright, let's get cooking. Let's start with the traditional meatballs again. Just gonna lower them in nicely. Get back over there. Alright, so just gonna check on them, see if they're ready to flip. Alright, I think that's pretty close. We can turn down the heat a little bit as well. Alright, one good way to tell that the meatballs are done is that they would have shrunk in size about like 20%. Still feel kind of bouncy, but they're not too hard. So I think they're just about done. So I'm going to remove it from the heat, and I am going to put the second set of meatballs in. It's one happy polar bear. Alright, let's do the second one. Oh. And off you go. these look about done, so I'm gonna turn that off and plate them. They smell pretty good. For the sauce, I've prepared a very basic sauce. And it's just salt, pepper, garlic, basil, and fresh local Hong Kong tomatoes. So we're just gonna cut up the tomatoes into cubes, and we're gonna make the sauce with it. I take the stems off first, and what I like to do is just give it a couple slices sideways, like that. Don't go all the way through. Only just go partially through, and turn it, and then give some vertical slices after that. And just one more, and then a couple more chops this way. And then it should come out as nice cubes. And at the very end, you can just kind of chop it up roughly. All right, and there you go. You got some nice tomato cubes. And once they're all done, we'll throw in the pot and cook them. So I just got to do it another 20 something times because I got a lot of tomatoes. Okay, so I finished chopping all the tomatoes, and what I've done is I added some extra virgin olive oil into the pot. I threw in the basil, the garlic, and the salt and pepper that I showed you guys earlier. And I'm going to heat that up a little bit, and once that's heated up, we're going to throw the tomatoes in. And we'll just leave that cooking for a little while. Right, so we're going to let this reduce into a nice tomato sauce. Alright, so these are the traditional meatballs with cheese in them. And now that it's done frying, we got the sauce going. So as per tradition, we're going to cook them and finish them off in the sauce. So the outside's nicely caramelized, nice and dark and crunchy looking. The only issue is the inside is probably still not fully cooked. So finish them in the sauce, we'll flavor the sauce and finish cooking off the meatballs. We're going to do this for about 10 minutes, and then we'll switch it out with the fermented tofu. And then that way, both of the meatballs will be cooked. So, I'm going to switch out in 10 minutes. So here's the traditional one with cheese, and this is the one with the fermented tofu. So let's give these a taste. Looks pretty good. It's cooked all the way through, as it should do, because we cooked it for a long time. Very good. definitely tastes a little bit of cheese. It's well seasoned and just everything a traditional meatball should have. It's got the herbs, it's got the garlic, very meaty and beefy. So it's very good. So let's try the one with the fermented tofu. Can't really see it, although I'm not surprised that fermented tofu's so soft that it's probably just melted right into the meat. Put a bit of sauce on it. Alright, the one with the fermented tofu is really good. You get a little bit of the astringent taste, but you don't lose any of the creaminess by replacing with the tofu, and it's still super flavorful. Like slightly fermented, slightly funky flavor, just barely shows through all the meat. And honestly, if I didn't tell anybody, I don't think they would even notice it. It's really good. I think this experiment worked out pretty well, surprisingly. It sounds a little bit weird replacing cheese with fermented tofu, but you know, we're essentially replacing fermented milk with fermented tofu. It's not that different. People use soy milk as a milk replacement all the time. So yeah, I recommend you guys try it. Alright, hopefully you guys found it interesting, and I highly recommend you guys try it. What other things can we replace cheese with using fermented tofu? Maybe if you guys have some ideas, throw some ideas our way in the comment section. See ya!